But for us, we have the belief that the private sector has to play a critical role. SMEs, not just in Sri Lanka, but across the world, were going through a really tough time with the pandemic. So I think it really reinforced the need for platforms like ours.
So once a company is onboarded with Sri Lanka at 100, it's not a short-term relationship. It's not a short-term partnership. It's right through.
The country has grown, but in fits and starts, right? The economic growth has been not really been broad-based.
Hello and welcome to the debrief with me, Roel Raymond. I have with me today Rashmi Pieris Paranavithana, the General Manager of Sri Lanka at 100. Sri Lanka at 100 is an important organization, especially at this time, and we're here to talk to her about what Sri Lanka at 100 is doing and what their plans for the future are. Hi Rashmi, thank you for joining me.
Glad to be here.
Yes. So I want to ask you right at the start, very briefly, if you can tell me what Sri Lanka at 100 is.
Right, so Sri Lanka at 100 is actually a vision to play a small but impactful role in helping Sri Lanka become a high-income nation, which sounds like a lofty goal. So we were actually launched in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. So this was the brainchild of our two co-founders, Dr. Kumudu Gunasekara and Rumidu Pieris. This was created as a not-for-profit initiative to really give back to this country and to really help the private sector be a key engine of growth, particularly the mature SMEs in this market. So Sri Lanka at 100 really is a project, it's a business development platform. While it's a not-for-profit initiative, it's very much a private sector-led platform implemented by Stax Inc., which is a global management consulting firm, and with funding from the USAID or the US government's development arm. And yeah, so we've been in operation now for about 15 months. And our goal really is to work with the most high potential mid-market firms, or what we call mature SMEs, to really help accelerate their growth and improve their internal operations and to attract new capital for them. Okay. So that in a nutshell is what Sri Lanka at 100 is.
So let's go back to the name Sri Lanka at 100. Why Sri Lanka at 100? What's the meaning behind it?
Yes, so a lot of people sometimes misunderstand what it stands for. Sri Lanka at 100 really is about helping Sri Lanka reach that high-income nation status by the time we reach 100 years of independence.
Right.
So that's what it kind of refers to, Sri Lanka at 100.
Right. So now independence, 100 years of independence is less than 30 years away. Do you think you will be able to achieve this goal in that period?
Yes, so it is a lofty goal, and I think for us, we understand that, for Sri Lanka to reach developed nation status, there are a lot of other factors that will also have to fall into place. The public sector, the civil society, policy reforms, etc., also will have to play a role in for us to actually get there. But for us, we have the belief that the private sector has to play a critical role, and within that, we really feel that mature SMEs and the SMEs have a big role to play in helping Sri Lanka reach that growth trajectory, and also to become a more resilient economy as well.
And as you all started, we were all hit by the global pandemic. We're still in the middle of the pandemic. What sort of challenges did Sri Lanka at 100 have to face during this time? Any specific challenges?
I don't think we were really derailed by the pandemic. I think it just reinforced the need for platforms like ours, because SMEs, not just in Sri Lanka, but across the world, were going through a really tough time with the pandemic. So I think it really reinforced the need for platforms like ours. There were some operational challenges in the sense, because of the lockdown, we were not in a position to host some of our capacity building events in some of the, more rural areas as we had previously planned. But we were immediately able to kind of pivot to conducting some of those events online. Even our screening and onboarding process to find these, the most high potential mid-market companies for our first round We had previously again planned to have it in an in-person setting, but again, we immediately kind of pivoted to hosting it in an online platform, and so that we were able to kind of manage that and weather that accordingly.
Right. So, and between July 2020 and September, how many, or in your first round at least, how many companies did you manage to onboard?
Yeah, so during year one, we actually had 2 rounds of onboarding. In the first round, we onboarded about 7 companies, and in the second round in year one, we onboarded 6 companies. So to date, we've onboarded 13 companies to the platform.
So will you be able to explain maybe some of the most specific COVID-related challenges that some of these companies had to go through, and what sort of support you guys were able to give them at this time?
So I think when you look at the challenges, I think these more mature SMEs, I think they have a lot of challenges they were facing even prior to the pandemic, which are common to, I think, most SMEs, like not being able to access new markets, whether it's new export markets or new customer segments, not being able to streamline their internal operations once they scaled up or, beyond a certain level. And also to, one of the most I think biggest constraints is being able to access new capital for their growth. And I think that's a constant challenge from the smallest SMEs to the largest SMEs. So those challenges were true before the pandemic. I think they were really exacerbated by the pandemic because there were now also day-to-day challenges like, supply chain issues to really being constrained with cash flow. So we, I think, were able to kind of, partner with these companies at that time. Some of these companies were also looking at exporting into new markets, etc. So I think for a lot of these companies, I think we partnered with them at the right time so that we can also then work with them and advise them on how to manage some of those new areas of or growth opportunities, and also manage some of those challenges more effectively, I think.
And some of these challenges still persist, right? There are shipping issues and stuff like that. So how successful do you think, I'm not talking from your point of view, I'm sure you all did as much as you can, but given the current circumstances, how successfully are you all able to overcome the challenges?
Yeah, so I think our platform, the core focus of our platform is really on providing advisory services. We really saw a need, in the market. There are a lot of ecosystems to support the startups. A lot of the large-scale businesses, conglomerates can also access, larger advisory firms. They have access to them. They can also afford those services. But the SMEs, even the mature SMEs, most of the time can't access these services. And I think our platform is really about helping these companies access these much needed services, whether it's, getting advice on a new market entry strategy or even carrying out a new marketing campaign, all the way from, helping improve their existing operations or optimize their processes. So we work with these companies across a wide area of these types of services, and we also partner with these other business development service providers as well. So what we've created is an ecosystem that works with, so we work with Stacks consultants that come on board to work with our companies, but we also partner with a lot of other business development service providers wherever these companies require support, because it's a very one-to-one custom service model. It's not a one-size-fits model. So based on each company's unique needs, we then work with them to basically provide the services
things like trainings and stuff like that, yeah?
So basically, once these companies are onboarded to the platform, our first step really is to identify which, what are the key gaps, what are the key challenges, what are some of the risks that they need to manage, what are the new opportunities they need to go after. And then we really work with the companies to kind of prioritize. It's a very collaborative approach. We work with the companies to kind of prioritize what's really pressing. And then in that first year, we then work on those more prioritized areas to implement some of those recommendations. Because we're also this is not a short-term 3-month accelerator kind of program. We want to partner with these companies over a longer period of time, because we think that's where we can really make an impact to really help these companies that are now in the kind of more mature SME stage to become large-scale businesses, because I think that's what will really help, Sri Lanka's economic growth as well.
Once a company is onboarded with Sri Lanka at 100, it's not a short-term relationship. It's not a short-term partnership. It's right through.
Yeah, that's not what we are looking at. We are looking at really partnering with them and then understanding their own unique needs and then working with them to address some of those at the moment what we're looking at is at least at a 5-year kind of growth journey with them.
And is there a cap on the number of companies you onboard? Because if you're giving this kind of support, then there has to be a limit to it.
So what we're looking at over the next 5 years, we're hoping to onboard at least 50 mid-market companies, and it goes through a rigorous selection process. And we've onboarded 13 companies, like I mentioned before. That was based on about 100 applications that we've received to date. So we are going to be, we're really looking for those companies that have the highest growth potential for us to kind of work with them over that long-term period. So yeah, goal is 50 companies in the next 5 years.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you 3 questions at once.
Okay.
Why SMEs?
Yeah.
What industries do you focus on? In the sense, is there a specific industry you focus on? And do you give any kind of special attention to, say, female entrepreneurs or any companies like that?
All good questions. I'll try to take them one by one. Why SMEs? So good question. And I think one I kind of touched on before, the fact that there is no ecosystem that's really focused on the mature SME space. And when you look at actually Sri Lanka's economic growth trajectory, what we've seen is that the country has grown, but in fits and starts, right? The economic growth has been not really been broad-based, not really been inclusive. A lot of the growth has been very Colombo district-centric or Western province-centric, which has left a lot of regions lagging, and also hasn't been very inclusive even from a gender point of view, right? We have not a great labor participation rate when it comes to the female participation. So when we looked at the SME space, that's why we really felt that for Sri Lanka to really achieve that economic growth trajectory that we all want for this country, SMEs really have to play a critical role in most economies. You often hear this term, SMEs are the backbone of economy. And I think when you look at Sri Lanka, the SMEs are the backbone of our economy in the sense, I think they contribute about 52% to our GDP. But if you look at their resilience, I don't think right now, I think the pandemic again really exposed this. They're not very resilient. They really struggle on accessing finance, especially during these kind of challenging times. And if you look at the SMEs, even most SMEs, even the more mature ones, currently don't really export to other markets. Most of them are still concentrated in our domestic economy. So we feel that, helping the mature SMEs to really go after new markets, helping them to enter some of those new markets also will bring in much needed effects to the country. And also I think helping SMEs, especially those based outside of the Western province and Colombo district, I think will really help uplift those communities, I think build those livelihoods. And I think that will also then help kind of, drive more inclusive, more broad-based growth. If you look at our 13 companies, most of them are actually based outside of the Western province or have a significant footprint when it comes to where most of their employees are based. Most of them are outside. And with regards to the third question on female entrepreneurship, yes, that is a key kind of priority for us. So when we conduct our screening and selection rounds, that is something we really give priority to. Both, regional distribution. So we really place both those aspects, that geographic inclusivity as well as gender inclusivity. So we really do try to promote companies that are women-led or those companies that have a significant female representation in its workforce. So both those factors we look at.
Okay, so besides that, what is the criteria that you look at when you're onboarding a company? What would somebody wanting support from Sri Lanka at 100 need to have?
Right, so I think to be one of those 50 companies that we are going to work with in these next 5 years, what we are really looking for are scalable, companies that have high growth potential. And we're looking at the more high end of the SME spectrum. So we are looking at companies that are Sri Lanka, registered in Sri Lanka, and also companies that earn at least about 50 million rupees per annum. We try not to have an upper end to that limit, but we're typically looking at companies that are generating about 50 million LKR to about 1.5 to 2 billion LKR revenue per annum. That's typically the range we're looking at. But in addition to those, we also conduct a lot of capacity building events to support even the broader MSME sector that often are smaller than the companies that we onboard.
Right. Now I've heard you have a 5-step process to what you all do. Can you just give me an update on that?
So it's a kind of step-by-step process in the sense we do, our screening and selection is quite rigorous. Maybe I can also talk a little bit about that selection process. So companies can apply to join our platform directly on our website at Sri Lanka at 100. It's quite straightforward. It's a short application process, asking for few basic data about your company. And if you meet those 2 entry criteria, like being a Sri Lanka registered and above 50 LKR million in revenue. And once they apply, our team will screen those applications, and the most high potential companies will be, or the shortlisted candidates will be invited to that second stage, which is the pitch round. So during the pitch round, we really look at the scalability of these companies, the ambition of those, the owners or the founders to really, how much hunger they have to grow these businesses. That's a key requirement we look at. We also look at the inclusivity and sustainability factor. If those companies, whether they're based outside of Colombo district, whether those companies have, a female-driven leadership or ownership or female representation in the workforce. So those are some of the key things we look at in that pitch round. And then based on that, the shortlisted companies then are finally onboarded to be onboarded as what we call our portfolio companies. So once they're onboarded, then we do that initial kind of analysis, strategy audit. Then we basically move into implementing those recommendations. That's kind of how that process works.
Right. You mentioned earlier that you had the support of USAID. And what kind of support do you get from USAID? How useful is it? And is there anyone else that supports you all in this endeavor?
I mean, even when we originally came up with this platform, USAID seemed like a very ideal fit for us, given how much they've engaged with the private sector in Sri Lanka. So they were quite keen to partner with us on this, and from the get-go they've been very supportive, and so they've funded this platform, and so they are a key funding partner. And we also jointly work with them on when it comes to our networking events or our outreach events. We partner with USAID. In addition to USAID, we've also partnered with NDB Bank, who is Sri Lanka at 100's banking partner. And they've again come on board with us to work with us on multiple areas. One, to really help present more SME-friendly financing solutions to our portfolio companies, as well as the companies that are in a broader ecosystem, as well as also to co-host some of these capacity building events that we do. Also, create this platform and operationalize it last year. So yeah, I mean, my background actually is quite different to this. I actually come from more investment research background in my previous workplace, and then I moved into Stacks about 4 years ago, to management consulting. And then when this kind of came up, I was really interested because I've always liked working with the local companies, but this really was something that I felt really passionate about, having the opportunity to work with companies that are in that mature SME kind of stage, because the potential is huge. I mean, you can really have an impact on these companies and help them in their growth journey. So that really kind of, appealed to me and, with what I want to kind of do as well.
So you've been here now for the last 15 months and much more to go as General Manager. Thank you, Rashmi. I wish you all the best and I wish the platform all the best. Perhaps before we end, you can just give the website so that people wanting to find out more about Sri Lanka at 100 and find out more about the companies that have already partnered with you guys can check on that.
Yeah. So we are actually available on our website, srilanka@100.lk. You can also reach us on all our social media channels. We are on Facebook, on LinkedIn, so you can definitely connect with us there as well. Thanks a lot for this. Thanks.
No, thank you so much for coming on board. Very excited to hear about the plans for Sri Lanka at 100, and I wish you guys all the best.
Thank you. Thanks again.